Hey y'all, this is Phil from the future, coming to you hot off the heels of my conversation with Tom. You'll get to know more about who he is at the very end, or you can put it together while we chat. This is a great episode about the specifics of how spiritual fitness, why spiritual fitness, and what spiritual fitness looks like for one person. And in Tom's case, who is a practicing Catholic, you can really hear, if you listen through the specifics of his theology, just how incredible spiritual fitness can be when used by healthy, organized religious values. And again, in Tom's demonstration throughout this episode, you're going to just hear over and over again the power of meaning and how that informs purpose and community and everything else. Tom's a very spiritually fit person, so get ready for a great episode of the Grow Self Spiritually Fit podcast. You're talking about this event that your church, which is part of the Catholic Church, is putting on
Right.
for family couples, and you said it's partly to like help them, but also it's a retention program because it's a
Right.
desire to build more relationships, which will help, which will increase the likelihood that they're going to come to Mass and everything else. Here's the big question,
Right.
Tom. So what? Why? Why would people want to continue to stay involved in the church? Like, I'm being devil's advocate here. Like,
Sure.
help me
No,
under
that's an excellent.
why? So, like, why would anyone want to continue to be part of a church program like that after you've already received your sort of quote unquote hell insurance? What's the purpose and point?
Yeah. Right. Well, so I guess there's two or three spots on this. One is, as a Catholic, we don't believe there's hell insurance. No, we don't believe in once saved, always saved. Um, we that is yeah, that's not something we believe. We believe that um, you're you are saved by grace of God, but that you have to cooperate with that grace constantly,
Mm-hmm.
and that you can do something, to fall out of God's ultimate grace. So there's no guarantee of eternal salvation. Now there's a great deal of confidence, but there's no guarantee. Um, the other thing is that, and this is sometimes what I preach on to people, is that you know, exactly why are you here? So why are you sitting out there in the congregation? Well, one of the reasons is because as Catholics we believe it is our obligation to uh, cooperate in the sacrifice of the Mass. The Catholics look at the Mass as actually almost it is work. We're not there to be entertained. We're there to cooperate with the priest, work with the priest, and be an integral part of the sacrifice of the Mass. But as part of that, then we also receive graces. And so the reason you want them to come back and I want them to be around is because I want them to receive those graces. And I think we talked about this earlier on another occasion that one of the great things that one receives from a relationship with Christ is inner peace. When Christ talks about his peace, peace, my peace I live you, my peace I leave you, he's not talking about a worldly peace or where there's no fighting, there's no conflict, where you don't have stress in your life. He's talking about an inner peace that says, hey, I got this. And what I am hoping for, that why I want them is so that they can have that. They receive the graces, they have this inner peace of, okay, the baby was up all night. The the bills are late. My wife hates her job. Blah 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 blah. Whatever it is, yes, it's all very stressful. We understand, but there's also inside, that in 100 years, hopefully, I will be in at the beatific vision. I will be with God, and this will all have been a flash. I don't know why. I don't know what, but I can get through this because I do have Jesus in my life, and I can make it. And there's something very calming about it. So that's, I guess, the second one. I don't remember what my third thing on that was on why we want them there. Obviously called to evangelize. That's one of the first things that Jesus did, is go out and make disciples of all men. And so that's what we're supposed to be doing. So even though they're here, that doesn't mean they're, if they go away, then we have to re-evangelize them.
Hmm.
It's easier to keep one than to find one.
That's the truth.
Did that answer?
Oh
Did that make
man,
any sense, or
yeah,
was that just
it
a
does.
bad
I'm
one?
totally tracking with you, Tom. Um, like what I'm hearing you say is like the first part being about how like the salvation isn't just a hell insurance, like you're in and then you're good for life.
Right,
Like I think about that
right.
how it goes with sort of physical fitness, where just because
Hmm.
like you become fit doesn't mean that like boom, you've now achieved health forever and ever. Amen. It's an ongoing thing
Correct.
that you need to maintain. And there are
Right.
certain actions and behaviors that can kind of increase your physical health and well-being as well as detract from it, in the same
Hmm.
light as your spiritual health and well-being and your relationship, that can add to the fruit in your life or perhaps take away. And
Right.
then there's the second part we're talking about, just the which has not been talked about yet on this podcast. So I'm so glad that you said it, Tom, which is I've asked a lot of people about how they are spiritually fit, what they do to be spiritually fit,
Hmm.
or things that help them endure difficulties. But you're the first
Hmm.
person to like specifically identify the why behind spiritual fitness, the benefits of spiritual fitness,
Right.
if you will. And
Right.
I completely agree with you. Top of the list, inner peace, a peace that is beyond
Hmm.
understanding, a
Yes.
peace that is not dependent on the circumstances of the present, here and now, the sort of what you
Hmm.
see. It doesn't matter how much money you have, how well you feel, how physically fit you are. Spiritual fitness means that you can have internal peace no matter what.
Yep.
Um, and
And you have to,
go
and
ahead.
I mean, you have to work at that,
Yes.
right? I mean, I think you do. You're right. It's just like working out in a gym. And that's a great analogy because it's also, um, I think people have an idea that, oh, once I get this relationship with God, it's all, la-di-da, nice, nice, and I never have to do anything again. And that's one of the reasons, honestly, why I don't like getting people too emotional about their religion. I like it to be like, if they're very emotional, I want them to step to an intellectual level, because your emotions can cheat you and your emotions can change. But you got to work at it, just like at the gym. And I think we talked about the liturgy of the hours, or the divine office,
Right. Say more
and
about that
how,
for our for the audience who doesn't really know that in as kind of simple layman terms as you can.
uh, uh, I do simple well, yeah, because I'm about as simple as you get. So the liturgy of the hours, or divine office, it has a bunch of different names, is a very old, probably third, fourth century, I think, is when it kind of culminated. And it comes from the Jewish tradition of praying multiple times a day. And so when the church, um, was officially separate, and even probably before that, it just created this thing of praying multiple times a day. Um, and so it starts with an invitatory. It's just this, you say the same thing every day when you start your prayers. There's an office. It's called the office, and it has um, Psalms, and then you read three sets of Psalms, and then you read a very not a very long, but a an Old Testament or a reading from the Acts, and then there's a fairly long, very often a gospel or a letter from an early church father, and then some intercessions, and then there's a morning, mid-morning, afternoon, mid-afternoon, and evening office. And those are much shorter. They can be said, the morning and evening office can be said in maybe 15 minutes, and it has the same thing, a set of readings, and but it's much shorter. And then there's a nighttime that is very, very short that can be said before you go to bed. And all ordained clergy in the Catholic Church. So I am a permanent deacon. I am an ordained clergy in the Catholic Church. We take a vow to say these things. The priests take a vow to say it through three of the seven offices. I take a vow to say the morning and the evening office. You've heard of, monks and nuns who are in monasteries, or, people who are in convents, they're more of a secluded lifestyle. They'll actually say all seven. Some of them get up at 4 a.m. to start it, and then it's an amazing thing. But we are vowed to do that. As I've taken a vow to God that I'll say those twice a day. And if I purposefully skip it, I consider it to be a sin. And thank God I'm being a little boastful, as I have been ordained about a year and 3 months, and I've never missed it. There have been times where it has been 11 o'clock, and I'm saying all of my office from the morning and the evening because I forgot or I got lazy or whatever. But especially when you do it in the morning, in the evening, like right before bed is an awesome time to do the nighttime office. It forces you to focus away from the day. Turn off the TV, go to a quiet place, leave your wife and the kids, or leave this, leave that. Turn off everything and sit down. And even if you're not doing it well, you're doing it intentionally, and you're focusing on God. And every time I do it, there's something in there, the little bit that jumps out at me and says, hey, why don't you pay attention to that? Or I will get a thought about something I'm supposed to be working on with the church, or, hey, maybe don't forget to, I find that as a time where I feel the Holy Spirit moves me.
Mm.
But you got to work at it. You're right.
Yes.
You got to work at it. And I think all religions have their traditions. Hopefully they can help them with that, And so but that's what the office is. And so we say that, multiple times a day.
Right. It's a perfect
It's really kind of
example
neat.
of just like this, of like the fitness routine aspect of
Yeah.
within Catholicism. And I love what you said about, maybe you can say it again because I'm going to butcher it. It's about the emotions, that you want people to not be emotional with their
Right.
faith. What was it? I
Yeah.
forgot exactly how you said it because it was really good. Um,
So I, I have brothers and sisters in the church that are very, very, I envy them for their outward, um, um, emotional, uh, I don't know what to describe it,
Sometimes they just say
relationship with Jesus.
charismatic.
Charismatic. Yeah. Well, we do have that in our church. We have that charismatic group in our church. But we have a lady in our church who, when, she sits in the front row, and I watch her and I think, oh Lord, why can't I have that? God, not in a negative way, say, God, give me that level of fire inside for you. Because she'll be, during some of the songs, she'll be standing with her hands in the air, waving back and forth, and that is not a Catholic thing.
Right.
I mean, we have Catholic gymnastics: up, down, kneel, sit, stand, kneel, sit, up, down. We get our gymnastics in, right? Movement. But this is just, she's into it. And a lot of our Protestant brothers and sisters are very much into that. It's, do you feel it when you go to church? And, if you don't feel it, then you don't have the Holy Spirit. And I think that can be challenging. And I've read authors who really have challenges with that too, really brilliant theologians, because your emotions can lead you astray.
That's what it was. Your
So you need to
emotions
have the
can lead you
emotional,
astray.
yeah. But if you add to that the intellectual, the theological, you know, understanding why I believe what I believe, why, whatever it is you believe, if you believe in the rapture, then you better study that and understand that and go back to the very beginning of it and know exactly why you believe that. I believe in the transubstantiation, in the real presence of Christ at the Eucharist. And I understand why that is and what it is, so that when I do have the times that I am kneeling at the altar behind the priest, and he is going through the Eucharistic prayer, and he is holding the wine or the bread, and I may have a doubt in my mind. Okay, that's an intellectual doubt, but I can always go back and say, no, this is why I believe what I believe. I don't have to worry about my emotions. And then when I do have my emotions and they're lifting me up, and there are times where I've been there and I've seen this, and I've been filled with this unbelievable burning inside when I see that transubstantiation at that time and occur, and I see the host being lifted up before me. Those emotions I can deal with. Okay, yeah, that's great. So it's just emotions can lead you astray, but very rarely is logic and study of what you believe going to lead you astray.
Mm.
That's going to lead you to the truth, and then you can allow your emotions just to create that other piece of your relationship
In other words,
with Christ.
relying solely on the emotions, the emotionality, the emotional experience to guide your spiritual fitness is pretty dangerous versus taking the time to use what's in between your ears rather than what's inside your chest to really think about to have a solid foundation to stand on that isn't as shifting and as subjective as how you feel.
Very well said.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I want to just take the
Yeah.
ball and run with that some more because, like,
Sure.
there's your next parallel of the fitness. How many times do you know people, and I'm going to say, I would be a hypocrite if I didn't say I was one of them, where working out is dependent on if I feel up to it.
Yeah.
If I
Right.
feel like I want to go to the gym, on my
Right.
email signature, on my personal email, I have the words discipline and then the math symbol for greater than motivation.
Hmm.
Like discipline beats motivation every time.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
motivation is emotionally subjective. If I feel motivated, I do it. If I don't feel motivated, I don't. Versus discipline, which doesn't give two flying flips about how you feel.
Right.
You do it anyway. Um,
Well, and
yesterday I
that's.
was yesterday I was getting off of work, with like the baby and everything, trying to pick her up and all that
Uh-huh.
stuff. And I'm like, my whole day's disrupted and everything else, but I made a commitment that I was going to exercise that day. And I was getting home, I put the baby down to sleep, and everything in my body said, go to the couch, turn on the TV, sit and watch
Uh-huh.
and veg out. And I kept feeling that
Hmm.
way. And I've had this happen a few times that I've learned that rather than like fight those feelings and thoughts, I just keep moving. And so I'm like, my brain is
Hmm.
saying go to the couch, but my body is moving to my closet. And my brain is saying sit down and watch TV, and I'm slowly putting on my workout clothes.
Yes.
And my brain is saying and my heart is saying, oh, it must feel so good to sit down. And before I know it, I'm sitting on my Peloton bike, logging into a class, and uh,
Right.
there I am, I worked out. Because if I was waiting on
Yeah.
my emotional experience, I wouldn't have got on there. But because I know in my logical brain the foundation
Hmm.
that I need to, I did it anyhow.
That's, yeah. And if you listen to any motivational speakers, will tell you the same thing. No matter what happens, don't break your routine. Just keep doing it. Just keep doing it. And, um, and that's it. It's perfect. It's perfect because yeah, you don't feel like it, but when you get done, you feel great
Yes.
and you feel so good about yourself. He's like, yeah, there you go, man. You did it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And the military is a perfect example of that too, is that, we train, uh, it's not do you feel like doing it? It's like you train it over and over and over and over again. So when you have to do it, you do it without thinking and you do it without, I won't say questioning, but you do it without,
Hesitation.
hesitation. Thank you. Yes, exactly. Hesitation.
Yeah, it just becomes
Spot on.
instinct.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
And
think that
that's,
that's where you can go back to where faith goes, where it's like that. I see this so often as a chaplain, which is it's so obvious to me when people are or are not spiritually fit, because when they're in the fire and the flame of tragedy, they are like the
mhm,
seeds that are grasping between the thorns versus the seeds that have the deep roots. It's so quick to
right.
see how quickly people wither, versus those who can
Mhm,
withstand the tragedy of what life brings, and it's because those who are spiritually fit have years, if not decades, of practice of spiritual habits day in and day out, regardless if things are good or bad, so that when shit hits the fan, they're doing something instinctually without hesitation,
mhm.
and that's providing them the help that they need.
Yeah. No, I think that's an excellent point. And even if it does go back, even if, they are they've got the deep roots and somebody's yanking on them, you know, they may get ripped up a little bit, they may get torn a little bit, but ultimately they're going to be back to, they're not going to get ripped out of the ground and thrown away and despair. And I think that's the thing. That's one of the worst things out there is despair. Is like, oh, there's no hope. It's like, I just, there's always hope.
Hmm.
Even if that hope is in a better afterlife, it, there's always hope. And that's what Christ gives us is that, um, that opportunity for hope.
Yes, hope amidst despair. And I think that the despair actually is more likely to folks who are more dependent on their emotional experience that defines their well-being versus those who
Mhm.
can be more grounded in their kind of in the faith aspect of things. Because I've seen that a lot
Yeah.
with certain theologies, and it doesn't need to be within the Catholic Christian realm. Any form of theology, especially um, there's a term for it. I read it in. Have you read Richard Fowler's book Stages of Faith? It's pretty well cited from like the came out in like '76 actually. Um, it's well
No,
cited among
stages of faith. I'll
chaplains.
write that down.
Stages of Faith. He wrote it as a graduate thesis and then turned it into a book, I think, when he did his dissertation. And it's funny because everyone and their mom in my career field quotes it, and I've never met anyone
Oh,
who's
really?
yes, but I've never met anyone who's actually read the book. They just quote his
Oh,
they just quote his stages and the summaries of his stages, but they haven't taken the time to read it. And I strongly recommend
interesting.
people that they should because they should know what they're citing before they start. But that's a whole other
I'll
conversation.
have to, I'll have to get that. I was just made the chaplain of my local fire department.
Oh, it's
And so,
o-
I'll have to read that because I don't know much about chaplaincy.
okay. Well, and hey, I'd be happy to
Good,
be a
good to
resource
know.
for you. This book is more
Oh,
about
definitely.
what Stages of Faith is about is Richard Fowler's application of the developmental stages of physiology and mental and sorry, of children to adults. Um, have you heard of
Okay.
like Piaget or um, any of the other like child-based development theorists?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
And I should probably should hear some. My wife's
No, you're good because
30-year pre-K teacher, so I don't know anything about that stuff.
you
I'm not that bright.
well ask her. You can ask her. Maybe she might know as well. My background is education, so that's how I know about it. It's not just
Oh,
common knowledge. Um, the point is that he takes there's these scientists who like behavioral scientists who took the time to study the development of babies up until they became adults, and like through research and observation we're able to create these sort of theories of when we hit certain milestones. So one of the
uh-huh.
ideas is like when you can play peekaboo with a child, why is the child having
Uh-huh.
fun? It's because the baby thinks that you're actually vanishing. And so when the baby sees you
Oh,
again,
yeah.
the baby's surprised and happy. But you can't play peekaboo with an adult because the adult knows that you're just covering your eyes up with your hands. And
Right.
so this is called object permanence, and it's one of the key hallmarks of one of the stages of development. Are you with me?
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah. All right.
Fowler takes this idea and says if we have certain stages of our own physiological development, what if we had the same thing within our faith? And he writes from a Christian
Uh-huh.
lens and like goes through and like marks off these like segmented stages of faith that people can develop throughout life. The reason why I'm bringing it up
Interesting.
um, is because it's this idea of being on the emotional side. I was saying that there's these like different theologies. One of the things that
Uh-huh.
Fowler mentions is that like at one of the earlier stages of faith, people kind of create this pantheon of gods. So they're more polytheists than they'd be willing to
Mm.
admit. So they believe in
Right.
God, but they also believe in the God of
Right.
TikTok, the God of my mom, the God of my dog, the God of my
Uh-huh.
marriage, the God of my friends, the God of my food, the God of my country. And if you were to observe their behavior without bias, you would say, you know what? They seem to be worshiping and pledging faith and belief into multiple quote unquote gods, even if they themselves claim to believe in a monotheistic religion.
Hmm.
And so I find that people who are based on their emotions are more in this category, and folks that are less emotional are actually more mature in their spiritual fitness level.
Mm.
What are your thoughts on
Interesting.
like maturity when it comes to spiritual fitness, and how have you seen someone's maturity affect the way that they experience life?
Wow, that's a great question. So how they experience life, or how they experience their relationship with Jesus.
I would say life, as because the thinking about more of the application of these beliefs would be helpful.
Yeah. Well, I think so. My experience, and I get to see this a lot of times as a former EMT and as some of the jobs I've held, is that there's a maturity level, and you see people making mistakes, and you say, well, that was just, was that mistake because you're dumb, or is that mistake because you are immature? So,
Ooh, good
um,
distinction.
right? Because there are some people that are just, God bless you, you're just not the brightest light in the Christmas tree. So, yeah, what? You didn't think that through, did you? Oh no, that was really, but if you gave them the choice, explain to them why spending money on this now rather than investing it or saving it in 20 years, you're going to be much better off. And they say, oh, I never knew that. Well, man, put that money in the bank, as opposed to, no, I'm going to spend that $10,000 now on this new toy. I don't care. To me is that's an immature act. That will get you in trouble. And you get the same, you can take that to physical relationships with people. You can take that to, um, being, in terms of maturity, being spiteful, angry, vengeful, um, doing stupid things, sucking it up and working at a job that you hate or dislike for another 2 years to get a certain amount of training in or experience in so that I can move to this other level, or that, I just got to, this is a great paying job. I need to work at it for 2 more years, and then this XYZ thing will be paid off, and I can move on to what I really want to do, right? Um, there, those are the things I see as being maturity. You can make those mistakes either intellectually, like you don't really aren't able to think it through, or it's just you just don't care and you make a bad decision. And I've seen, people make those bad decisions constantly
Hmm.
in the EMT world where you're like, really? You really needed to take those drugs, did you? You know, I mean, did you think about it? I don't care. I don't care. Okay, well, you know, God bless you. So I don't know if that answered the
Yeah,
question
that does.
you were looking for or not.
I mean, there's so much to unpack. I love it. The boil it down, the different of like the way to measure maturity is how willing someone is to practice delayed gratification versus
Right,
reaching for instant satisfaction. Um,
right.
there's actually a study that's it's funny. I'm on this brain thought about childhood development. This is cool. Um,
Uh-huh.
there was a study done.
Well, if you think about it, by the way,
Go ahead.
if you think about it, we are all we are all infants
Uh,
in our relationship. We are all children, infant children, adolescents at most. I think most of us in our relationship with Jesus, in our relationship and understand, and we're all nothings in our understanding of Him, right? And of God and the Holy Spirit. So we are all growing. I mean, I see people much younger than I am whose walk and relationships and understandings are much further than I am, or and may ever be because I'm old, you know, and that like, wow, I look at these people, wow, that's amazing. Wow, you really, you have a spiritual maturity level. You have reached that at 30 that I didn't get till I was 60, kind of thing.
mm,
So we're all growing in that way. And we won't be adults until that moment of purification after death. And we praise praise God, are face to face with Jesus and God the Father and the Holy Spirit. And in the Catholic Church, we call it the beatific vision, where we actually can have face to face. You know, God doesn't have face, but you know what I mean, with God.
yeah.
Then we're adults. You know, we're not equal to God, but we are now adults in our spiritual
Mm, yes.
relationship.
Yeah, totally. Like this idea that we're all kind of playing on a level playing field here, and even folks who are much more mature than the people who are like the greatest infants, we're talking about such a small like scale of difference in the grand scheme of
In the grand scheme, that's why I
relative.
think you're constantly referring back to children and growth is very applicable to everybody's, developmental levels
Yes.
in their relationships with God.
And
And it's funny too, because I think if you talk to, like in my world, in my tradition of these monks and nuns who literally, like the Benedictines, they live in a relatively secluded thing. They work and they pray. That's all they do is they work and they pray. So they work on the grounds of what they're doing, whether it's a school or a farm, and they pray. And they do the office. They stop at every one of those office points and they come back together and they pray as a unit. And their constant focus, because they have nothing, is on their relationship with God and praying for us. And but if you talk to some of them, I've seen some of these, like, you guys, it's like, wow, your level and where you are, and they're like, oh man, I'm nothing. You should see so and so. I've seen people that are so much more, and so it's like, wow, everybody feels like they have this great growth they can do, even objectively, if they're really probably doing pretty good.
hmm yeah, I mean, 100% I agree. It's a constant growing process that that can lead to some level of I mean, I don't want to say satisfaction because it's never truly enough. But it's definitely some place where um I think it just becomes dangerous when we start comparing my spiritual fitness to your spiritual fitness to his
And
spiritual
yeah,
fitness, right? You
that's
know,
not, you can't do that at all, right?
that's not the purpose. It's more of
And
it's
like you said,
a
it's dangerous
community.
for you to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
I
it
mean, because
really
that's
is.
not what God wants.
And so I want to like so make this point about the this like story then is that
Yeah.
they were able to observe the behavior of infants or toddlers. Maybe they're like 2 or 3 years old enough to have they acquired language, they can take instructions, but they're like
Uh-huh.
just children. And they were put into a
Okay.
room and they were given a marshmallow. And they said, if you wait 5 minutes, we will, and do not eat the marshmallow, we will give you two marshmallows. Or
Uh-huh.
you can eat the marshmallow now, but you will not get the second marshmallow later. And then they left the room and they closed the door and they hit the timer and they tracked it. And some kids, as soon as the door closed, gobbled up the marshmallow, and other kids, you started to see some amazing coping skills. Like some kids started ignoring it, other kids started crying, some children started moving around the room and doing other things to distract themselves, but they demonstrated that they had developed ways to cope
Huh.
with the stress of waiting for something because they had this idea that waiting for something would be better than having it now.
Would be interesting.
And then they traced these kids throughout adulthood, and lo and behold, there was a correlation between negative outcomes in life and those who ate the marshmallow.
Really?
So it was one of those, the sort of like hypothesis or the assumption that was made was that at a very early age, if children do not develop a sense of delayed gratification or self-control, then it's
Mm-hmm.
much harder for them to do so later in life, and the less able you are to practice delayed gratification, the more likely you are to experience suffering or consequences such as incarceration or joblessness or drug addictions or failed relationships and stuff like that.
That's fascinating.
So, how would you
Fascinating.
say in your world, um, faith, Catholicism, your practices, how does that help with delayed gratification?
Um, well, what like delayed gratification in terms of um gosh, that's a good question. I don't know.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, there's right and wrong, and in terms of like doing something that would be considered sinful, it's just you just don't do it. Um, I'm,
Yeah,
I'm
but what
actually
if that
I'm not
sin feels
really sure.
really what if that sin feels really, really good right in that instant moment, The whatever that sin might be. Um, in this in
Yeah.
using your language. So why not? What keeps you or what helps what how do you help people understand the reason not to give in to that and practice the delayed gratification of resisting the temptation?
Well, I would say for me, it is the knowledge, and honestly, let's go back to kids and children. I think of this all the time when, and let's face it, the Catholic Church has some what society would consider fairly controversial views on things, and you know, and there are times where I've said, I just don't understand this. I can understand it, but I don't like it. And to me, it is analogous to um, when was raising my children, and mine are much older than yours. Your beautiful daughter is, but okay, I know that you should not do something, and I know by making this difficult for you now, it's going to be better for you in the future. And therefore, I'm going to impose this upon you. And I think a lot of times, for me, it's easier when I am in a conundrum in that area. It's like, okay, I don't know exactly why, maybe I do know why, but I find it very hard to follow this rule. But I'm going to because I know that God has my best interests in heart, and whatever I'm going through and dealing with, it is either for my best interest or somehow uh, is I'm somehow a player in his plans. Um, one of the I heard a talking one time, and he said one of the things that he believes is going to happen in heaven is that God is going to explain to you and show you how your suffering and your trials and your tribulations or other great trials and tribulations, like the Holocaust or something, specifically on you, how did God use that as part of this greater plan for the salvation of the world? How did you fit into that? I know this was bad for you. My mom lost two children. Gene, I know this was horrible for you. This was a crusher. But let me show you how I used it. And she died almost 10 years ago. So I'm hoping that, God did tell her that. But that kind of goes that thing of, okay, I know how this is going to work better for you. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of how, my faith, my belief in God and the world, the church that he founded, he created, how that is, kind of all plays together, I guess.
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm not sure if that answers your question or not. I
No,
was out rambling.
Tom, you keep answering every time. I'll let you know when you don't answer. I'll interrupt you and say, wait.
Okay, good. You let me
Um,
know I'm a knucklehead.
yeah, exactly. So like to continue in this process, what I'm hearing you say is that it goes back to just your core beliefs that within spirituality, the general areas of meaning, purpose, and belonging, uh, the foundation of meaning, how you understand how the world works, your core beliefs, the tenets of faith, these things that are just built into what makes Catholicism, and how your explicit buy into that meaning
Hmm.
segment, then is your filter to everything else that then you encounter. And
Yes.
the way that you're able to experience delayed gratification is you go back to your source. What is your your root code, your coding, if you will, and that coding
Hmm.
says, okay, this is good for you, do it. This is bad for you, don't do it. But you're also
Right.
saying that you're able to buy into that meaning more because of your lived experience as a father, and going
Yes.
through that
I
fatherly
understand it
experience
more
with your
now.
children, you see it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I've had my other
Yeah.
friends on who are in my stage of life where we're all new dads. And there's been a lot of common conversation about the idea of what it means to parent, and how, um, we've got these ideas of like, yeah, like my child wants to um, crawl to the edge of the bed, but I'm not going to let her, even though she wants to,
Hmm.
because I know that if she keeps going, she's going to fall and break her neck.
Hmm.
So even though
Yeah.
she's crying while I'm holding her because she's not getting to do what she wants, like that temporary discomfort is helping her avoid a much greater and longer
Yes.
lasting pain that she, in
Yeah.
her own limited vision, can only see.
Can't see. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And I think God does that for us. I mean, and I don't want to sound like I'm on proselytizing here at all, but that's one of I, it is a benefit and a challenge of being Catholic. And one of the, the challenges of being Catholic is I look at my Protestant friends and brothers and sisters and I say, if they don't like something, they can just move off to another. Oh, I don't like that teaching of the church, and I disagree with this. They kind of go find something else that they like that agrees, makes their with their internal moral compass. And that's a challenge with a Catholic because I can't do that. But the other piece of it is incredibly freeing knowing where the guardrails are. It's like being a train on a track. You know where it is. You're not going off that track. You may not like where you're going sometimes because you don't understand it, but I have the belief that my church was, I believe, was, founded by Jesus Christ. But the other piece is that it is the authority, that Christ created this as an authority and the Holy Spirit is guiding it. So when the church says, and I'll get something really controversial here, that artificial contraception is immoral. I don't have to agree with it or believe it, or I just have to accept it. And that's very freeing
Mm.
because I don't have to fight with a lot of things. I am urged to push and to understand. But eventually it's like, you know what? I don't have to listen to what's coming in from the media. And I don't have to because the media is telling me I'm wrong. I don't have to buy it. And that's a very freeing thing. And that is the loving arms of Jesus around you as a child has that that my church is that daddy that you are, not letting your daughter crawl to the edge of the bed. My church is that loving arms keeping me from falling off the cliff.
Mm.
And I feel, I cry about it like your daughter does, but I also understand it. And I'm like, wow, I appreciate
Yeah, and I think that most folks get the wrong idea with 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 organized religion in
that.
general,
Yes.
and certainly Catholicism in particular. When you have the few zealots who are out picketing or something like that, um, rather than trying to just sort of live within their framework and try and share their understanding with kindness and through love and empathy,
Hmm.
rather than with a whip and shouting. Um,
Yes.
that's the
That never
It
works.
never does. It never has and
It's
never
useless.
will. It is useless.
No,
If anything, it's more
Jesus never did that. Jesus was
self-gratifying.
just, yeah. Jesus was just all about, hey, let's, how do I make you feel? How do I basically? His thing was always loving people.
Yes, the
I'm
hospitality
gonna
aspect
love
of
you
it.
to death.
Like, here are my
Say what?
it's the hospitality of it, right? Here are the expectations, here are the things. And this is it. And uh,
Yeah.
we don't have to talk about, there's nothing to talk about. This is just it. So if you're in, you're in. If you're not, okay.
Yep. I'm
Um,
gonna love you. I forgive you. Don't sin again. But I love you now. And the other thing was, it was, hey, I love you. Don't sin again. Now let's go have a meal together.
uh,
Let's
yeah.
go enjoy each other, you know? And I think we forget that, a lot of times.
Oh, it's so true. Well, I feel like this is coming to a beautiful close, Tom. Uh,
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's been that long.
just like that, that's what happens.
Oh
For
my
all of
goodness.
our
Yeah.
listeners, although it's kind of been clear a little bit, you've given some hints about what you are and who you are. Would you mind introducing yourself before we close up?
Oh, yeah. Good thing you didn't do this at the beginning because they would have all just clicked next. So that's a good move on your part.
Smart move, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, my name is Deacon Tom White. I am a permanent deacon in the Catholic Church. As I said earlier, that is a ordained member of the clergy. I take vows I take certain vows to the church. I take a vow of obedience to my bishop. I promise to pray those hours. I take a very unique vow. Some people think of celibacy, even though I am married. But that just means that if my wife predeceases me, I cannot remarry. Um, I am a unpaid position, and I work. Well, I'm sitting in my office at the church right now, but I have a job. I work for myself, so it gives me a lot of flexibility. And I am at St. Joseph's Catholic Community in Eldersburg, Maryland, and it's just an awesome faith community with great men as priests and great men and women as volunteers. Um, Married, grandfather, greatest thing in the world. You can't beat being a grandparent. So uh, that's kind of me.
That's you. That's Tom. If
That's it.
last final question, I try to ask everybody this when I remember. What one piece of advice do you offer to anyone listening to help them on their spiritual fitness journey? One piece of advice. Only one.
Yeah. Uh, so I will give you the thing that was my greatest, uh, what I felt was the most important thing for me when I was in the formation to become a deacon. You know, I had to go. We went to a seminary in Maryland once a month and went through training, but it was saying the liturgy of the hour at the office every day, because and so find something like that where more than once a day, and it doesn't have to be a lot. Like I said, the liturgy of the hours, you know, I probably spend a half an hour, 45 minutes total in a day doing it.
And then we were cut off. And Tom had some incredible wisdom that he shared that will be lost forever. Unfortunately, due to technical errors, our conversation got cut short. But in what I remember Tom saying was that for him, it's the daily discipline, the daily grind of practicing his spiritual beliefs through prayer, meditation, community that allows him to do the incredible things that he's done. So we're gonna end the episode at this cliffhanger, which, hey, that's a great point of life too. We can't always have nice rosy endings, and we can deal and live with the uncertainties. Tom, thanks so much for doing this episode with me, and to all those who've tuned in, thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another great episode of the Spiritual Fitness Podcast.